Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acomb, and on the program this morning, we're being joined by Erin Skinner. Thanks so much for being on the program.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Well, congratulations on running for Supreme Court in the 7th Judicial District. How's the campaign going so far?
It's going really well. I have no concept of a good campaign versus a bad one. This is my first foray into politics.
Sure.
But the response has been so enthusiastic and so welcoming.
Oh, yeah.
It's been really lovely. I'm enjoying it a lot. It's exhausting.
Oh, yeah.
But
you'll be ready for November 5th, right?
Yes.
Sleeping in November 6th. It's a long process, and going right to, and we talk about this, it seems like with every candidate, the petition process, day one, it's a helpful process because you get to learn from what people on the street think. But boy, that's a lot of work too.
And I'd never done any of that before,
right?
Because as a confidential law clerk to a sitting judge, I'm not allowed to engage in politics. I'm bound by the same rules that he is. And so I truly had no idea the process that our parties went through to give us candidates to vote for in November. I am so grateful. And I feel terrible that I didn't realize how much work it took to get someone on the ballot.
Yes. And it's really interesting with you being a judicial candidate, because now if you are successful on November 5th, you have 14 years now where you can't talk about politics whatsoever.
Yep.
But now we have to talk politics.
Exactly.
But that's why
as best we can.
Yes. And I don't ask, obviously, political questions because you can't answer. And I always give this disclaimer on the program before we do the interview because I can't ask specifics. So let's start with something like this. How about your background? Tell us about your background.
Sure. I went to Syracuse University for law school, and as soon as I graduated, I became a criminal defense attorney.
Okay.
Onondaga County does not have a public defender's office. All of their defendants who are indigent get assigned a private attorney who is then paid through the county.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I did that for about 2 years, and then I'm from Rochester. I grew up in Greece, and I had an opportunity to come back and work at the Monroe County Public Defender's Office, which, quick plug, is one of the best public defender's offices in the nation.
Okay.
Other offices try to model their office based on the Monroe County Public Defender's Office. It's truly fantastic. So I was there for about 2.5 years, and I applied to clerk at the Appellate Division 4th Department here in Rochester.
Okay.
They hear all of the appeals from Supreme Court, County Court, Family Court, Surrogates Court, and the Court of Claims from Buffalo to Syracuse.
Wow.
So it's the second biggest geographical appellate division and the second most populous. And after I did their 2-year program, I was lucky enough to go to the Court of Appeals, which is the highest court in New York State. And I clerked there for 2 years.
Wow. We
call it clerking. It's really you're an attorney for the court. You write reports that advise the judges on how you think appeals should be handled. It's, of course, ultimately left up to the judges, but they rely on your research and your recommendation when they're forming their own decisions. And then while I was there, my supervisor, when I was at the 4th Department, called and asked if I'd be interested in coming back to Rochester to work in chambers with one of the judges at the 4th Department. And I said, no, I just moved my family from Rochester to Albany. I'm married. We have, at the time, she was 3 years old. Oh, no, 2. I just moved them across the state. Couldn't move them back again.
Yeah.
A month later, he calls me back and says, I know you said you weren't interested, but the presiding justice of the 4th Department is going to call you in about 10 minutes and offer you that job.
Oh, thanks for the heads up, the 10-minute heads up, right?
Completely unprepared for this phone call.
Oh, wow.
So he did. He called and asked if I would come back. And I loved working at the 4th Department. It is one of my favorite jobs I've ever had. And luckily, I have a very understanding husband who works from home. And he was willing to make that move back to Rochester.
Wow.
So we came back and I started working in chambers. I wrote all of the decisions for my judge. I wrote all of the reports that our chambers were in charge of providing to the other panel members. And then when she retired in 2022, I started working for Justice Mark Montour. He's a judge elected out of the 8th Judicial District in Buffalo. he asked me to stay on and work in his chambers. So I do the same thing for him. I write his reports, I write his decisions. He ultimately approves them, but he relies on my work and my research in forming his opinion on how appeals should be handled.
Well, and you're obviously busy then, at least it sounds it to us. Why did you decide to take on this challenge, this run?
I would say for two reasons. One, I got so tired of sitting at home feeling helpless
Sure.
about our national political picture.
Mm-hmm.
It is so divisive, and everyone is using, you know, fear-based rhetoric.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so to be sitting at home on the sidelines, thinking there's nothing I can do, finally I thought, well, there is one thing I could
Right.
do, right?
Yeah.
This is what my background is in.
Right.
This is what I could offer to my community. And if I wasn't willing to put the time and money and effort into running, I really couldn't expect other people to do it
Sure.
either. And then the other reason is because as much as I love the appellate division, it takes years
Mm-hmm.
for cases to get to us.
Okay.
And in the meantime, defendants are sitting in prison when maybe they shouldn't be, or families are separated and they shouldn't have been, or plaintiffs don't get medical care that they need because their case got dismissed. And so I really want the opportunity to get it right the first time before they have to go through that appellate process. And I had the benefit of having looked at hundreds of cases from start to finish, this bird's eye view for their appeals, and to be able to bring that to the trial court bench, I think is is going to be so helpful.
Sure. And we're talking about the Supreme Court Justice 7th Judicial District. How you mentioned this is your first time campaigning, but it feels good, I'm sure, to get out there and talk with people. What are the voters saying to you when you talk with them?
I think a lot of them have the same worries,
Mm-hmm.
that same feeling of kind of helplessness, and this idea, and especially when I was doing the independent petition, I was meeting people on both sides of the aisle.
Right.
And it's so clear when we stop and talk to each other one on one,
Mm-hmm.
we agree on so much more than we disagree
I agree.
on. So that has been fabulous. Just that I always figured that was the case, but to have that confirmed in
Mm-hmm.
these one on one conversations, um, initially when the Democratic ticket had President Biden at the top, after that first debate, you can imagine it
Right.
was
Yeah.
we were all walking around with our heads down.
Sure.
Um, Ever since they have changed the top of the ticket, there's been this energy
Gotcha.
from voters who are excited. And I mean, the concept of voting for possibly the first female president is it's energizing. And so there've been it's been a real change, especially in the outer counties, which I was surprised about. The Democrats that I've worked with out there, because there's pockets of Dems in all
Oh yeah, of
of the
course.
8 counties.
Yeah.
Their events have doubled in size since they
Wow.
changed the top of the ticket. So they're really trying to capitalize on that momentum.
For the local. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So that's the 7th Judicial District. You just mentioned that's 8 counties?
8 counties.
Wow.
It is Cayuga, Livingston, Monroe, Ontario, Seneca, Steuben, Wayne, and Yates.
Wow. So you've got a lot of miles on the car.
Oh my gosh, my poor car.
I know. Well, and you were mentioning, and I want to talk about this for a second to kind of clear up some confusion, because you were on the Democrat line, the working families line, and there's this line that I had never heard of, and we were talking a little bit off the air about it. Tell me about the Judicial Integrity line.
So that is an independent line. New York State no longer has an independence party.
Right.
They didn't have enough votes in the last gubernatorial election to keep the party alive. But you are able to attempt to petition on to an independent line. And I truly believe judges should not be political.
Right.
It does not matter what party I belong to once I
For
have the
14
robe
years.
on.
Right. Yeah.
I have to follow the law.
Yeah,
That's it.
Mhm.
No matter who comes in front of me, no matter what party they belong to, what my personal beliefs are, they don't matter.
Right.
And so I wanted to get that third party independent line for people who agree that judges shouldn't be political.
Right.
We were successful. We needed 3,500 signatures.
Wow.
We got 4,390.
Wow.
But because I have two major party endorsements, I cannot have a standalone independent party line.
That's really strange.
It's very
Yeah.
strange. And if you're running for governor or New York State Senate or New York State Assembly, you can have as many lines as you can get.
Right.
But a judicial candidate, they have placed my independent line in the same row as my Democratic nomination line. So if you look in the box on row A with my name, it will say Democrat and Judicial Integrity under that.
Oh.
So you can still vote for the Judicial Integrity line, but it will be in the same box as the Democratic line,
Do you think
which
that?
kind of defeats the purpose
Yeah,
of
that
an independent.
100% of the name. Do you think that'll cause confusion? Because I don't know if I've ever seen anything quite like that.
uh, I I think it can be confusing.
Yeah.
I don't see how it could not be,
Right.
but I'm hoping that I can get out that message that this is what we did, this is why it's under there. You can still vote for me under that independent party line. It's
Sure.
just going to be on row A.
Yeah. And since we're on the issue of kind of explaining the race and specifically with the parties that you're in, what does the race itself look like? How many people are running for the position of Supreme Court?
So there are two open seats.
Okay.
There are no incumbents. The two judges whose seats are opening have reached mandatory retirement age.
Okay.
They can seek senior status, which allows them to stay on for 2 more years. They have to get certified to be able to do that. But even if they seek senior status, their seats still become open under the Constitution. So technically, there are no incumbents running for these two seats.
Okay.
Myself and a gentleman named John Bringawat, he is the Monroe County Attorney.
Mm-hmm.
We have received the Democratic nomination and the Working Families Party nomination.
Okay.
And then there are two individuals, Ed White.
Mm-hmm.
He is a current Supreme Court clerk for one of the judges over at the Hall of Justice in Rochester. And Judge Stacy Romeo, she's a current family court judge in Monroe County. They have both received the Conservative and Republican nominations.
So there's 4 people running for 2 positions, and those who
Correct.
get the most votes. So technically, it could be a Democrat and a Republican.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Oh, isn't that interesting? So if you are successful and you get this 14-year term on the Supreme Court, just 7th Judicial District, excuse me, what issues do you think you'll be focused on? What will that job look like for you?
So the Supreme Court's the court of general jurisdiction, which means they can hear almost any type of case.
Oh, interesting.
They hear all of the complex civil cases. So if your damages are over a certain amount, you would have to file in Supreme Court. So medical malpractice, slip and falls, labor law, union contract interpretation, constitutional violations, all of those types of issues. They also hear some of the higher level felony criminal cases. County court has jurisdiction over criminal cases, but Supreme Court, when they need help, they will shuffle some felony cases over to Supreme Court. And then, ironically, all divorce cases have to be filed in Supreme Court,
that's
not
kinda-
family court.
That's weird, isn't it? I wonder why that is.
very
Some
weird.
antiquated rule for some reason.
Right.
Yeah.
Supreme Court can transfer a case to family court, but it has to start in Supreme Court. So if you're getting a divorce, you're not going to family court.
Isn't that strange?
Yeah.
But it is quite a workload, I'm assuming, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. And we have the current bench right now. There's 18 judges, 17 are Republicans.
Okay.
One is a Democrat who was cross-endorsed by all the major parties. He sits at the appellate division, though, so he's not at the trial court level anymore. And a lot of our Supreme Court judges currently have a criminal background. And so I think it would be very helpful to elect somebody who does have a strong civil background like I do to help take over some of that workload.
Sure. And we were talking about the campaign and knocking on the doors and all the fun that represents. How about endorsements? How have the endorsements been?
So again, for judicial candidates, it's kind of weird because there are some groups who aren't willing to endorse a candidate who really can't do anything for them,
Right.
even if they win. I am so honored to have been endorsed by the Labor Council, as well as the United Auto Workers Union. I'm a CSEA union member. I have been since 2014, so that one meant a lot to me to get the
course.
two unions who do judicial endorsements. And then I've also been endorsed by Eleanor's Legacy,
Oh, yeah.
which is a group that endorses female political candidates.
Oh, interesting. So, in closing, before we head out here, where can people find out more about your campaign? Do you have a website, those type of things?
I do, Skinner24.com.
Oh, wow. That's catchy.
Make it easy,
Yeah,
right?
that's right. So in closing, what would you say to voters before they either early vote starting on October 26th or if they go into the voting booth on November 5th? What would you say?
I would give you the worst performance review I've ever gotten. It's that my innate sense of justice made it difficult for me to do my job well.
Well, there you go.
I was told that
Wow.
in the legal profession.
Wow. Okay.
I left that job.
Yes, I would hope.
I can do this job really well, and I consider it the highest form of public service that I could render, and that's all I want to do. Yeah. Help and serve my community.
Erin Skinner's been our guest, Supreme Court Justice, 7th Judicial District candidate. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. Stay with us.